He didn't scream. He didn't threaten. And he didn't pull a gun. He just looked at the bruise hidden under my foundation and asked, "Who the hell hurt you?" I whispered a name. By sunset, my stepfather hadn't just left town. He had been completely erased from existence. And that was just the beginning. The rain on Bleecker Street was relentless, the kind of New York downpour that washes the grime into the gutters, but leaves the city smelling like wet asphalt and old secrets. Inside the Gilded Cage, a high-end jazz lounge tucked away in Greenwich Village, the atmosphere was suffocatingly warm. Chloe Bennett adjusted the silk scarf around her neck, wincing as the fabric grazed her collarbone. She sat at the glossy black Steinway, her fingers trembling slightly before she forced them into the opening chords of a Chopin nocturne. She wasn't a performer here. She was background noise for men who wore suits that cost more than her annual rent. At the corner booth, table 9, always table 9, sat Rico Moretti. Everyone in the city knew the name, though few dared to speak it above a whisper. The Moretti family didn't just run construction and sanitation. They owned the silence between the sirens. Rico was the youngest Don in the family's history, 32 sharp-jawed with eyes like shattered glass. He was nursing a glass of Macallan 25, watching the room with the predatory stillness of a panther. Usually Chloe avoided his gaze. Tonight she was distracted. The throbbing in her left shoulder was a rhythmic reminder of the morning's argument with Frank D'Amico, her stepfather, the man who had moved in after her mother died and turned their Brooklyn brownstone into a shrine to empty whiskey bottles and losing betting slips. This morning, he'd wanted $2,000. When Chloe said she didn't have it, he'd thrown her against the hallway radiator. She missed a note. It was a subtle slip, a flat key instead of a sharp, but in the hush of the lounge it sounded like a gunshot. Chloe froze. She looked up, terrifyingly aware that Rico Moretti had stopped drinking. He was looking right at her. She finished the set hurriedly, her heart hammering against her ribs. As she gathered her sheet music to retreat to the employee break room, the floor manager, a nervous man named Arthur, intercepted her. "Mr. Moretti would like a word, Chloe," Arthur said, sweating despite the air conditioning. "Don't make him wait." Chloe's stomach dropped. "Arthur, I have to get home. The rain." "Chloe, please." She swallowed her fear and walked toward table 9. Up close, Rico was even more intimidating. He smelled of expensive tobacco and cedar wood. He didn't stand when she arrived. He just gestured to the empty velvet chair opposite him. "Sit," he said. His voice was a low baritone, smooth, but carrying the weight of absolute authority. I apologize for the mistake, Mr. Moretti," Chloe stammered, sitting on the edge of the seat. "My hands are a little stiff tonight." Rico leaned forward, the crystal glass clinking softly as he set it down. "I don't care about the music, Chloe. I care about why you're wearing a scarf in July." Chloe's hand flew instinctively to her neck. "It's a fashion choice. I'm fine." Rico's eyes narrowed. He reached across the table. His movement was so fast she didn't have time to flinch. He didn't grab her. He gently hooked one finger under the edge of the silk scarf and pulled it down just an inch. The concealer she had applied in the bathroom mirror was thick, but the purple-black welt on her collarbone was darker. It was the shape of a man's thumb. The air around the table seemed to drop 10 degrees. The chatter of the club faded into a dull buzz in Chloe's ears. Rico pulled his hand back as if he'd been burned. His expression didn't change, but his eyes, they went dead. Cold. "I'm going to ask you this once," Rico said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Who the hell hurt you?" "It was an accident," Chloe lied, looking down at the table. "I fell." "Liar," Rico whispered. That's a handprint, Chloe. A man's handprint. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a silver lighter, flipping it open and shut. Click, click, click. Who was it? An ex-boyfriend. A landlord? Please, Mr. Moretti, I can't. You can, he said. And you will. He leaned in closer, invading her personal space, his dark eyes locking onto hers. Look at me. You play in my club every night. That makes you mine to protect. Now give me a name, or I have my men tear this city apart, finding out who touched you. And trust me, they are much messier than I am. Tears pricked Chloe's eyes. She was exhausted. She was scared. And looking at Rico, she saw something she hadn't seen in years: safety. A dangerous, violent kind of safety, but safety nonetheless. Frank, she whispered the name, tasting like bile. Frank D'Amico, my stepfather. Rico stared at her for a long moment. He didn't blink. He just nodded once. D'Amico, he repeated, tasting the name. The gambler. You know him? I know his debt, Rico said darkly. He checked the Rolex on his wrist. It was 2:30 p.m. Go home, Chloe. Pack a bag. What? Why? Just go home. Rico signaled his bodyguard, a mountain of a man named Luca, who was standing by the exit. Luca will drive you. Do not go inside your apartment if Frank is there. Wait in the car. Mr. Moretti, please don't hurt him, Chloe pleaded, though she wasn't sure if she meant it. He's the only family I have left. Rico stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. He looked down at her, and for a split second, his expression softened. Family doesn't leave marks like that, Chloe, he said. By sunset, you won't have to worry about Frank D'Amico ever again. The ride to Brooklyn was silent. Luca drove the black Escalade with professional detachment, weaving through the rain-slicked traffic of the Brooklyn Bridge. Chloe sat in the back, her hands trembling in her lap. By sunset. The words echoed in her mind. It was currently 3:15 p.m. The sun would set at 8:23 p.m. What did Rico mean? Was he going to pay Frank off? Scare him? Chloe knew who the Morettis were. She read the papers. But Frank was a small fish, a nobody with a drinking problem and a gambling addiction. Surely a Mafia don wouldn't waste a bullet on a man who passed out in his own vomit 3 nights a week. When they arrived at the brownstone on 4th Street, Luca parked the car but locked the doors. Mr. Moretti's orders. Luca grunted, his eyes scanning the street. We wait. Wait for what? Chloe asked. For the cleaning crew. 10 minutes later, a silver sedan pulled up. 2 men in blue coveralls got out. They looked like maintenance workers, carrying toolboxes. But they moved with a military precision that no handyman possessed. They walked up the steps of her building. One of them didn't even knock. He manipulated the lock in 3 seconds, and they disappeared inside. Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs. Luca, is Frank in there? Mr. D'Amico is currently watching horse racing on the couch, Luca said, glancing at a tablet mounted on the dashboard. Chloe realized with a chill that they had tapped the building's security feed. Don't worry, Miss Bennett. They aren't going to kill him in the living room. Too much mess. Kill him, Chloe gasped. I didn't ask for him to be killed. Luca turned around, his face stone cold. You didn't ask. The boss commanded. Inside the apartment, the timeline was moving fast. Chloe couldn't see what was happening, but she could imagine it. Frank half drunk on cheap bourbon, shouting as the door opened. The realization that these weren't debt collectors from the local loan shark. 20 minutes passed. The rain hammered against the roof of the Escalade. Then the front door opened. Chloe pressed her face against the tinted glass. Frank walked out. But he wasn't being dragged. He wasn't bleeding. He was walking stiffly, flanked by the two men in coveralls. He looked terrified. His face was pale, his eyes wide and vacant, staring at nothing. He was holding a single small duffel bag. They led him not to the silver sedan, but to a black van that had just pulled up behind Luca's car. The side door slid open. Frank hesitated for a fraction of a second. One of the men simply placed a hand on Frank's shoulder, the same shoulder Frank had bruised on Chloe that morning. Frank flinched so violently he nearly fell, then scrambled into the van like a dog obeying a master. The van doors slammed shut. It drove away, disappearing toward the Belt Parkway. The two men in coveralls got back into their sedan and left. Silence returned to 4th Street. "He's gone," Luca said, unlocking the car doors. "You can go up now." Chloe sat frozen. "Where did they take him?" "Nowhere," Luca said. "Frank D'Amico doesn't exist anymore. His debts are cleared. His lease is terminated. His phone is at the bottom of the East River. But people will ask." The neighbors saw a man leave of his own accord," Luca replied. "Mr. Moretti is very thorough. There will be a letter found on the kitchen table. Frank has decided to move to Florida to pursue a business opportunity. He won't be coming back." Chloe opened the car door and stepped out into the drizzle. Her legs felt like jelly. She climbed the steps to the brownstone and pushed open the door. The apartment was eerily quiet. The smell of stale whiskey was still there, faint but fading. She walked into the living room. It was immaculate. The broken glass from this morning. Gone. The pile of betting slips on the coffee table. Gone. The hole in the drywall where Frank had punched it last week. It had been patched and painted over with fresh white paint that was still wet. On the kitchen table sat a single envelope with her name on it. Chloe opened it with shaking fingers. Inside was the deed to the apartment transferred solely into her name, and a note written in elegant, sharp cursive. "The debt is paid. The pest is removed. Lock your door, Chloe. I'll see you at the club tomorrow. E." She looked at the clock on the microwave. 7:45 p.m. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long, bloody shadows across the kitchen floor. He had promised by sunset, and he had delivered. But as Chloe stood in the silence of her home, finally free of the man who had terrorized her for a decade, she didn't feel relief. She felt a new kind of fear. Frank was a monster, but he was a monster. She understood. He was chaotic and weak. Rico Moretti was a god, controlled, powerful, and lethal. And now she owed him. Just as she was about to lock the door, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She picked up. "Hello. Did you find the deed?" Rico's voice was unmistakable. He sounded like he was in a car, the hum of an engine in the background. "Yes," Chloe whispered. "Rico, what did you do to him?" "I told you," Rico said. "I handled it. But Chloe..." "Yes. Don't think this comes without a price." Chloe's breath hitched. "What do you want?" Frank talked. Rico said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming colder than she had ever heard it. "Before we relocated him, he told us why he was in debt. He wasn't just gambling on horses, Chloe. He was selling information." Chloe frowned. "Information Frank doesn't know anything important." "He knows you," Rico replied. "And apparently someone else is very interested in you. Someone from my past. Frank sold your schedule, your roots, and your pictures to the rival family in Chicago." Chloe gripped the counter. "I don't understand." You don't have to understand yet, Rico said. But Frank vanishing wasn't just about charity. It was a tactical move. You're a target, Chloe, and as of tonight, you're under my protection. I didn't ask for your protection. You didn't have to, Rico said. You play my piano. You belong to the Moretti family now. The line clicked dead. Chloe stared at the phone. Outside, the sun finally slipped below the horizon, plunging the room into darkness. She ran to the window and looked down at the street. Across the road, standing under a flickering street lamp, was a figure. He was wearing a long coat and a fedora, watching her building. It wasn't Luca. It wasn't one of the men in coveralls. He lit a cigarette, the flame illuminating a scar running down his cheek, and smiled up at her window. Rico was right. Frank was gone, but the real nightmare had just arrived. The scarred man didn't knock. Chloe had barely stepped away from the window when the glass of her second-story balcony shattered inward. The sound was like a bomb going off in the small apartment. Shards of glass sprayed across the hardwood floor, glittering like diamonds in the street lamp's glow. She screamed, scrambling backward over the couch as the man in the fedora vaulted through the broken frame. Up close, the scar was even more terrifying, a jagged line running from his left temple to his jaw, pulling his lip into a permanent, gruesome sneer. He held a suppressed pistol with a practiced, casual grip. Frank really should have asked for more money, the man rasped. His accent was thick Chicago South Side. You're prettier than the pictures. Chloe backed into the kitchen, her hands fumbling behind her for a knife, anything. Who are you? I'm the repo man, sweetheart. He grinned. And you're the overdue asset. He lunged. Chloe swung a heavy cast-iron skillet from the drying rack, but he caught her wrist mid-air with bruising force. He twisted her arm, forcing a cry of pain from her lips, and pinned her against the refrigerator. The cold metal of the gun barrel pressed against her temple. Quiet now, he hissed. Sal Rossi is waiting. You don't want to keep your father waiting, do you? Father. The word barely registered before the front door of the apartment exploded inward. This wasn't the polite lock-picking of the cleaning crew. The door was kicked off its hinges with such force it cracked the plaster on the opposite wall. Rico Moretti stood in the doorway. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket anymore. His white dress shirt was rolled up to the elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and ink. In his hand was a custom Sig Sauer P226. He didn't hesitate. He didn't monologue. Thwip, thwip. 2 shots silenced, coughed into the room. The scarred man screamed, his hand exploding in a spray of red as he dropped his gun. Rico moved like a wraith, closing the distance in 2 strides. He pistol-whipped the intruder across the face, sending him crumbling to the floor, unconscious. Silence returned to the apartment, heavy and smelling of cordite. Rico turned to Chloe. His chest was heaving slightly, his eyes wild. He scanned her body for injuries, his gaze intense and possessive. "Did he touch you?" Rico demanded. The calm, cool dawn from the jazz club was gone. This was a man on the edge of violence. He said. Chloe was shaking so hard, her teeth rattled. He said something about my father. Rico cursed in Italian, a harsh, guttural sound. He holstered his weapon and grabbed Chloe's arm, gentle but firm. "We are leaving. Now. My things. Buy new ones. Move." They rushed down the stairs. Luca was waiting by the escalade, the engine already running. As they sped away, tires screeching on the wet pavement, Chloe watched her brownstone disappear. It was the second time today she had lost a home. They didn't go to a hotel. Luca drove them out of the city toward the Hamptons. They pulled into a gated estate that looked more like a fortress than a home. High walls, cameras, and armed guards patrolling the perimeter with Rottweilers. Inside the mansion was cold and modern. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the dark ocean. Rico poured 2 glasses of brandy and handed one to Chloe. Her hands were still shaking so badly, she spilled a little on the rug. "Drink," he ordered. She did. The alcohol burned, grounding her. "Explain," she said, her voice finding some strength. "He said, Sal Rossi. He said, father. Frank was my stepfather. My biological father died before I was born. That's what my mom told me." Rico sat on the leather sofa opposite her, scrubbing a hand over his face. He looked tired. "Your mother lied to protect you, Chloe." He pulled a file from the coffee table. It was thick, yellowed with age. "Frank didn't just sell your location," Rico said softly. "He sold the truth. Your mother was a lounge singer in Chicago in the 90s. She caught the eye of Salvatore Rossi, the don of the Chicago outfit." Chloe felt the room spin. "The Mafia, the outfit," Rico corrected. "Ruthless, old school. Your mother got pregnant. She knew Rossi would never let her leave, that you would be raised in the life. So she ran. She found a nobody named Frank D'Amico in Brooklyn, married him for cover, and hid you in plain sight. And Frank knew. Frank found out a few years ago. He's been blackmailing your mother's memory ever since. But he got greedy. He contacted Rossi. Rossi is dying of cancer, Chloe. He has no sons, no heirs. Just one illegitimate daughter he hasn't seen in 25 years. Rico leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "That man in your apartment was sent to bring you back to Chicago. You are the sole heir to the Rossi empire. You're worth billions, Chloe. And you're the only thing stopping a massive power vacuum that will tear the underworld apart." Chloe set the glass down. "I don't want it. I'm a piano player." "To them, you are a chess piece," Rico said. He stood up and walked over to her, kneeling so they were eye level. The proximity was overwhelming. She could smell the gunpowder and the expensive cologne. "But here's the problem," Rico murmured, his thumb grazing her cheekbone, wiping away a smudge of dirt. "Rossi is my enemy. By rights, I should hand you over and broker a peace deal. Or I should put a bullet in you to cripple his legacy." Chloe stopped breathing. "Are you going to kill me, Rico?" Rico stared at her lips, then back to her eyes. The air between them crackled with electricity. "I have killed men for looking at me wrong," Rico whispered. "I have burned down buildings for insurance money. But when I saw that bruise on you today, when I heard you play that nocturne," he leaned in his forehead, resting against hers, "I realized I would burn Chicago to the ground before I let anyone take you." He kissed her. It wasn't genital. It was desperate, fueled by adrenaline and danger. It tasted of brandy and blood. Chloe melted into him, grabbing the lapels of his shirt. For a moment, the Mafia, the hitmen, and the lies didn't matter. There was only the heat of the man who had saved her. But the moment was shattered by the ring of Rico's secure satellite phone. Rico pulled away, breathless. He answered the phone, his face hardening instantly. "Speak," he barked. He listened for a moment, his jaw tightening. "I see," Rico said. "Tell him I accept." He hung up and looked at Chloe. The lover was gone. The Don was back. "That was Marcus Thorne," Rico said. "The lawyer for the commission. Sal Rossi knows I have you. He's called a sit-down." What does that mean? It means tomorrow at sunset we meet. I have to trade you for peace. You're giving me up. Chloe felt betrayed, the warmth of his kiss turning to ice. No. Rico said, a dark, dangerous smile spreading across his face. I'm going to make you the queen. The meeting place was neutral ground, the Tubuai Flight Center at JFK Airport. Abandoned by the public for the night, the futuristic architecture looked like something out of a sci-fi movie, stark and echoing. Rico and Chloe walked in, flanked by 10 of Rico's best men. Chloe wore a black dress Rico had procured, sleek, elegant, and armored. She felt like she was walking to her execution. On the other side of the vast terminal stood the Chicago contingent. Salvatore Sal Rossi sat in a wheelchair, hooked up to an oxygen tank. He looked frail, a skeleton draped in a $5,000 suit. But his eyes were sharp. Behind him stood an army of soldiers, and beside him was Marcus Thorne, the legendary fixer of the underworld. Thorne was a real figure in these circles, a man who didn't carry a gun, but could destroy families with a single legal brief. He held a briefcase. Rico Moretti. Rossi wheezed, his voice amplified by the acoustics of the hall. You have something of mine. Rico stopped 10 paces away. He kept a hand on the small of Chloe's back. I have a pianist named Chloe Bennett. I don't see any Rossi here. Look at her. Rossi coughed. She has her mother's eyes. Come here, child. Chloe stepped forward, her heart pounding. She looked at the dying man. She felt nothing, no connection, no love, just pity. I'm not going to Chicago, Chloe said clearly. Her voice didn't shake. Rossi laughed, a dry, rattling sound. You don't have a choice. You are the blood. The empire is yours. All you have to do is sign the papers Marcus has prepared. You become the head of the family. You marry my second-in-command to handle the wet work. And the legacy continues. And if I refuse, then you are a liability, Rossi said simply, and we eliminate liabilities. A dozen guns on the Chicago side clicked off their safeties. Rico's men raised their rifles so instantly. A standoff. The air was thick with the promise of violence. Wait, Rico said, his voice cutting through the tension. There is another way. I'm listening, Rossi said. Chloe is not just your daughter, Rico said. She is my fiancé. The silence was deafening. Even Chloe turned to look at him, shocked. Rico didn't look at her. He stared straight at Rossi. We are to be married, Rico lied, or was it a lie? Which means if she takes the Chicago seat, the Moretti and Rossi families are united. New York and Chicago. One empire. Rossi's eyes narrowed. He looked at Marcus Thorne. The lawyer nodded slowly. It would create a monopoly, Don Rossi. The commission would support it. It solves the succession crisis without a war. Marriage, Rossi mused. She is a nobody. Can she handle the life? She handled Frank D'Amico, Rico said. And she's standing in front of you without flinching. Rossi looked at Chloe. Is this true? You are with him. Chloe looked at Rico. She saw the desperation in his eyes, the silent plea. He was gambling everything, his life, his family on her playing along. She thought of the bruise Frank gave her. She thought of the years of fear. Then she thought of Rico pulling the scarf down, asking who hurt her. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a player. Yes, Chloe said, lifting her chin. I am with him. And I have terms. Rossi blinked. Terms? I don't want Chicago, Chloe said, her voice gaining power. I stay in New York. The Rossi operations will be managed by Rico. I want the deed to the Gilded Cage, and I want 50% of the Chicago profits funneled into a legitimate trust. If you don't agree, you can shoot us, but you'll die knowing your legacy ended in a puddle of blood on an airport floor." Rico looked at her stunned and impressed. She had just outnegotiated 2 Mafia dons. Rossi stared at her for a long, agonizing minute. Then he started to wheeze. It took a moment to realize he was laughing. "She is my daughter," Rossi rasped. "She has the balls I wish my lieutenants had." Rossi waved his hand. "Marcus, draw up the papers. The merger is approved." The tension in the room snapped. Guns were lowered. Marcus Thorne opened the briefcase on a terminal bench, and the signing began. Two hours later, they were back in the Escalade, driving toward the city lights. Chloe sat back against the leather seat, exhausted. She felt Rico's hand find hers in the darkness. He interlaced their fingers. "Fiancé?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "It was the only play I had," Rico said, looking out the window. "You don't have to go through with it. The papers are signed. You're safe. You're rich. You can leave." Chloe looked at him. She saw the loneliness behind the power. She realized that for the first time in her life, she wasn't being used. She was being partnered with. "I don't break contracts," Chloe whispered. Rico turned to look at her. "Chloe, besides—" She smiled a small, genuine smile. "I kind of like the sound of Mrs. Moretti." Rico didn't smile. He leaned across the console and kissed her slow and deep, a promise sealed not in blood, but in devotion. "Then get used to it," he murmured against her lips, "because I'm never letting you go." 6 months later, the Gilded Cage was packed. The air smelled of expensive perfume and success. Chloe sat at the Steinway. She wasn't wearing a scarf tonight. She wore a diamond necklace that cost more than the building. She played the final chords of the Chopin Nocturne, letting the notes hang in the air. The applause was thunderous. From table 9, Rico raised his glass. He wasn't just the boss of New York anymore. He was the king, and she was the queen. Frank was gone. The threats were gone. Chloe smiled at her husband, reset her hands on the keys, and began to play. It was a new song, a love song, and for the first time, every note was perfect. And that is the story of Chloe and Rico. From a falsified note on a kitchen table to the union of 2 massive crime families. Frank D'Amico thought he could sell a secret, but he didn't realize that some secrets are too dangerous to keep, and some women are too strong to break. What did you think of Chloe's transformation? Do you think she made the right choice by staying with Rico, or should she have taken the money and run? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this darker, twisty romance, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. We have a thriller involving a CIA agent and a runaway bride coming up next week that you do not want to miss. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there.